What is, with everything that we've laid out, your investment strategy for retirees?
So I like to focus on investing for income. Most retirees need to get income out of their portfolio. And if you're invested in stocks and mutual funds, primarily growth-related investments, the only way to get 3 or 4 or 5% a year out of your portfolio is to start selling shares. If you're in retirement and you're going to be living in retirement and withdrawing money from your portfolio, the fact is I want you withdrawing from the interest and dividends, because interest and dividends can be spent without any impact on your principal at all. If you have 10 years or less to retirement, you need to start pulling back. A big mistake retirees make is they wait until the day before they retire to make a change. And for the last decade and a half, they've gotten away with it. But for the next decade and a half, maybe not.
The biggest fear that I hear from clients is the fear of running out of money. And that all boils down to the fact that they don't really know what they can do to avoid that scenario. My goal when I meet with prospective clients is really to figure out what is the purpose of their money. My goal in working with retirees is to help them develop income strategies for a secure future.
I'm your host, Anthony Siccaro. We are your retirement income source, and this is the place where retirees come for income. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us here on AM KNX 1070.
Welcome to this quarter's Friends and Family webinar. I'm your host, Anthony Siccaro, founder and president of Providence Financial and Insurance Services, located in Woodland Hills, California. I'm also host of the Providence Financial Retirement Show, which airs every Saturday and Sunday morning on AM KNX 1070. And this quarter, as with most quarters, we're going to spend some time giving you a market update and answering your questions. And the reason that we do these Q&A sessions is for 2 reasons. One, it really is to give you, our clients, our valued clients, just an update on the market so you have an idea where things are and where we're going and what you can expect going forward. I don't have any notes. I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm going to basically talk about the market. Well, when I say I don't have notes for you. I have notes for me, but I don't have a PowerPoint that we're going to be using. I'm almost treating this like a live TV interview where you're going to have questions and I'm going to turn around and give you those answers. But really it is to thank you, our clients, for being clients and to give you an update as to where we are going. That's number one. Number two, it is to give you the opportunity to invite your friends. We do a lot of unsolicited referral business at Providence Financial. We don't ask you for referrals, but by providing a lot of education, it's natural that referrals come our direction. Now, as Providence Financial clients, you have the peace of mind of knowing that you have a strategy for retirement that puts you in a position to never have to worry about running out of life before you run out of money. But a lot of your friends don't have that. And there's a lot of people out there that are concerned about inflation, concerned about tariffs, concerned about what the Federal Reserve is going to do, concerned about their retirement. Retirement has lots of different pieces, and most people don't know how to take those pieces and put it into, put that puzzle together so that they've got a clear picture. But because you're clients of Providence Financial, you do. So the reality is, by allowing them and inviting them to this Friends and Family webinar, it gives them a chance to kind of evaluate us, to evaluate me, to evaluate the concepts that have given you the confidence and clarity that you have in your retirement. And then if they decide that they want to contact us, then it's completely up to them. So 2 reasons why we do these. One is to do a market update for you and answer your questions along the way. And the second reason is just it's a very easy, seamless way to allow you to refer others to us. So if you're a client, thank you for your business. Thank you for your trust. If you're a guest of a client or a friend of Providence Financial, not family yet, then welcome, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions as well. Now, I am going to give you an update, but there is a Q&A session. You all should be able to see it, where if you click on the Q&A above, you should be able to type in your questions. And I don't see that anyone has typed in any questions yet. And if we don't have any questions, then we're going to have a Q&A without the Q. So I'm going to give you an update, and then, we'll be done. So you might get questions as we go. You might come up with questions, but let me go ahead and just start giving you an update from the perspective that we have. And there are really three things that consumers and retirees have on their mind right now: inflation, tariffs, and the Federal Reserve, what the Federal Reserve is going to do. That's all tied together. So let's talk about inflation really quick. Well, inflation has been sticky. Depending on the measure that you look at, there's the PCE, there's the CPI, there's core, both of those. No matter how you look at it, it's been the high 2s, low 3s, and it's been like that now for well over a year and a half, probably approaching a couple of years, and it's been very sticky. It started off because of the supply chain issues, right? The supply chain demand broke down, and then that's where inflation came. We had to print a lot of money to make sure that we didn't go into a huge recession or even depression. And I think the Federal Reserve did a good job of keeping us out of that situation. But and inflation has dropped. The reality, though, is in fact that although inflation's dropped, sorry, I got a question. And so we do have a question for you, first question. So at least now I know it works. Even though inflation has dropped, it was at 9.1%, I think was the highest inflation year over year back in May of 2022. And now it's down to around 3%. Even though it's dropped, though, it's stayed at 3%. The Federal Reserve's mandate, they want to get it down to 2%. Now, I don't think that's realistic. And they don't want to get it down to 2% before they take action. If they wait till it gets to 2%, they're going to be way behind the 8 ball. But the fact is that they need to see what direction inflation is going, and it has trended down. It's stuck at this level, and over the last few months, it's trended back up a little bit. Not a lot, but not down in the direction that they want it to go. Now, what's interesting is that you've got services inflation and you have goods inflation. Goods inflation has been what's trended down. Services inflation, not so much. Why? Because of the labor market. The labor market and inflation are really tied together. The GDP of our country, 70% of our GDP, gross domestic product, is coming from consumers, people spending money. And the labor market's been really tight. What does that mean? It means that there's been a lot of jobs available and fewer workers. Because of COVID, because of the pandemic, there were a lot of workers that permanently left the workforce. There were people that decided to retire early. There were people that were forced to retire because of their beliefs. And there were a lot of jobs available, but not enough workers to fill those jobs. And so has continued to today, or until about, I don't know, if we go back a couple of years, when I was doing live TV interviews a couple of years ago, there were almost 2 jobs available for every worker. 2 jobs available for every worker. That means that a worker could leave their current job and have a really good chance of getting a new job at a higher pay. And if an employer wanted to keep a worker at that company, then they would have to pay them more. I'm an employer. We probably have 20 employees across the companies that I own, most of them with Providence Financial. And we have good employees. You guys know that. But it doesn't come without a cost. It's more expensive to go out and hire a new person than it is to pay someone more to keep them. And over the last few years, I've had to give a lot of raises, and they deserve it. I'm not complaining. But what happens is when it comes to the services component of inflation, the labor inflation, the wage inflation is sticky because you can't take it back. When it comes to the goods, commodities and groceries, that stuff fluctuates. Grocery stores can raise their prices based on what the commodities are. They can lower their prices when things go down. You can't do that with wage inflation. Imagine if I were to go back and tell my employees, hey guys, guess what? Labor market's soft, and I gave you guys raises a couple of years ago to keep you, but now I'm going to take those raises back. Doesn't work. So when you give a raise, you're not going to be able to take it back. And that means that the services component is going to be a lot more stickier. The wage component is a lot more stickier. And that's a part of what's causing the entire inflation rate to be sticky. But the labor market is softening. There were 2 jobs available for every worker 2 years ago. Now it's about a 1-to-1 scenario. So it's softening. We're not in any way, shape, or form in Mayday territory. We're not in the position where we have to, cry uncle, have to worry about it. That's not where we are. It's just a softening labor market. And year over year wages have gone down as well, too. But the inflation market, the inflation in general is still sticky, right around 3%, again, depending on how you look at it. And a lot of it is because of labor. Now, the challenge is as goes labor, as goes the economy. And with the jobs market softening and with unemployment creeping up, you're going to see people, and we've already seen it, you're going to see people that are starting to spend less. And in some of the recent interviews that I've done where they're asking me about, what sector should we think about, what sector should we avoid? One of the sectors to avoid is the consumer discretionary sector, which basically includes things like movies and cruises and travel and stuff like that. All the stuff that are discretionary items. You don't have to go to the movies. Very expensive to do that. You don't have to travel. And when people start to cut back, it's the movies that are going to be the first thing that go, and then travel and so on. And we're going to start seeing that as well. So inflation has ticked up in the last couple of months. The labor market has cooled down, but not to a point to where people aren't still spending money. They're starting to slow down on the spending. Savings is starting to slow down. And credit card debt is starting to go up a little bit. And that trend is probably going to continue. Companies are not keeping people as long as they did before. Layoffs are starting to go up as well, too. So the labor market's going to continue to soften. As the labor market softens, then you're going to see less people spending money. Now, you would think that if less people are spending money, then inflation is going to come down, right? But that may not be the case. Why? Because of tariffs. Someone's got to pay the bill. And it really hasn't caught up to us yet. The whole tariff discussion hasn't caught up to us yet because it does take a while to get through the system. Companies at the beginning of the year did a lot of front loading of inventory. What that means is they thought that with the tariffs going to come, they would buy a whole bunch of inventory at the lower prices to be able to front load and fill their warehouses. And a lot of companies are still living on that inventory. So it hasn't caught up with us from a company standpoint. Consumers did the same thing. I was having a conversation with someone right when the tariff started. So we're going back a few months. I had a conversation with someone who said that he went out and bought his wife a car. It's something they knew they needed to do this year or next year. And he said, the tariffs were coming. I knew autos were going to be expensive. I just went out and did it. So a lot of people went out and bought stuff ahead of time, which means that there's a little bit of a lag between the effect that we're going to see from tariffs and what's actually happened at this point. Now, the reality is we don't know what the ultimate impact of tariffs are going to be. I said on Liberation Day, if you go back to a few months ago, Liberation Day, when the market went crazy. I think when that happened and Trump announced all these tariffs, there were well over, I think there were close to 150 tariffs. And I did an interview. They called me up on TV. I don't remember what network. And they said, can you talk about this? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so I got on TV and we talked about it. And I basically said, look, it's a political maneuver. Trump is a negotiator. That's the bottom line. He's a negotiator. And he's negotiating, and it's proven to be true. And meanwhile, the market went down by 3,000 points in one day, and a couple of days later, I think for a couple of days in a row, it went down by 1,500 points, and people were panicking. People were scared, but it's been a political ploy. All the tariffs that he said were going to happen, most of them have been rescinded, and it really focuses down to the primary countries. China is where we are still negotiating. But Trump has seemed to have gotten his way along with this, and ultimately the companies are going to eat a lot of tariffs. They're going to build it into their pricing as they usually do, but it is going to be, some of it's going to be passed on to consumers as well too. So that's going to, allow that's going to cause inflation probably to continue creeping up because of the tariff. So consumers are getting weaker, jobs are getting weaker, but if the weakness results in people having to pay more money anyway because the things are more expensive, then inflation could very well creep back up at this point. And that's a concern that we have. So now we get into stagflation. What's stagflation? Well, stagflation is when the economy quits growing and we still have inflation. That's a word that's been tossed around. I don't think we're in, matter of fact, we're not in any imminent danger of that, but it's something to keep an eye on. It's almost like if you're driving somewhere and you want to keep an eye on the map, you look for the traffic ahead. And that's kind of what stagflation is. It's, the economy is growing. The GDP is slowing down. GDP last year was, what was GDP last year? It was 2.8%. It's predicted this year to be somewhere between 1.6 and 1.9%. So inflation, or GDP, is 50% lower. The economy is slowing. And if the labor market continues to soften and people have less money to spend, that trend is just going to go down. The economy is going to slow down. We had negative GDP the first quarter of this year. So it was actually negative. 2 quarters of negative GDP legally is the definition of a recession. So it is slowing down. And if we get to a point where GDP is equal to growth, or there's no growth at all, but we still have inflation, that's stagflation. That's not a good scenario. That won't be a good scenario for the stock market. And it won't be a good scenario for the Federal Reserve. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve. They've got a pretty big meeting coming up here, right? The 16th and 17th, I think, is when it is. And it's widely predicted that they're going to lower rates. The question is, are they going to lower rates by 0.25%, by 0.5%? They've got several more meetings this year. They've got this meeting and then 2 more, and they're predicted to lower interest rates by 0.25%, 3 meetings in a row. That means 0.75% for the rest of the year. Quite frankly, I don't see how they can do that. Their mandate, the mandate for the Federal Reserve is 2 things: full employment and inflation. That's their goal. They don't care about the stock market. Well, let me rephrase that. They shouldn't care about the stock market. That shouldn't mean anything to them. They shouldn't care about the Trump rhetoric. None of that should mean anything. Do we have inflation under control? And their target is 2%. It's not really 2%, but that's what they say. And is the labor market, is unemployment in a reasonable number? And unemployment, has been in the 4% range. It's been between 4 and 4.2 for the last year. In 2024, it was between 3.7 and 3.9, kind of that range. So it's ticked up. It just recently went to 4.3%. It's the first time it ticked up 1 more percent. And it's heading in a direction that could be concerning, because you don't want unemployment to get so far up that a lot of people don't have work. And so it's something that they're keeping an eye on, is the unemployment rate. But the same thing for the inflation rate. If inflation, and that's the bigger of the 2, by the way, for the Federal Reserve, it's the inflation that's the issue. The inflation has driven all their policy moves over the last couple of years. The unemployment's been fine. It's the inflation. And if the inflation has already ticked up, and it has, then how can the Federal Reserve lower interest rates? And that's interesting. But it's predicted that they are. I think there's like an 80% chance that they're going to lower by 0.25%. Even though we have some, we've had some negative inflation news. We're going to have some more inflation news this Friday. So that's also going to be interesting as well, too, to see what happens next week. And that's going to come into play. But I really don't think that they should lower interest rates, but they're going to. And the stock market likes that, right? It's all priced in. The stock market wants lower rates. Why does the stock market want lower rates? Well, because it means more people will spend money. The interest rates is what the Federal Reserve uses, is a tool that the Federal Reserve uses to be able to control how hot the economy is. Think about your house. You have a thermometer, you have air conditioning. You can use that air conditioning to control the temperature of your house, right? If it gets too cold, you want to heat it up. If it gets too hot, you want to cool it down. And interest rates are the air conditioning to the economy. Because if the economy is starting to get too hot and GDP is getting very high and inflation's growing, and it's getting to a point where we don't want it to go, where it gets just too hot, then the Federal Reserve can raise interest rates. And what that does is it causes everything to be more expensive. If you want to buy a car and interest rates are higher, you're going to think twice before you buy a car. If you want to buy a home, right? What happens to mortgage rates? Well, we know what happens because, mortgage rates are 6 or 7% even still today. So they raise and people are going to buy homes. That's part of the reason why homes have gone up in value, but it makes things more expensive. But at the same time, that's not just true for you. That's also true for corporations. If corporations, if they have to borrow money and they have to pay more, they've got less money to hire employees. They've got less money to put into CapEx, they call it, capital expenditures, right? To go out and build and grow. So people curtail their spending because it costs more money to spend, and that cools the economy down. Well, on the other hand, if the government wants to spur on the economy, they want more people to spend money, they do the opposite. They lower interest rates. It incentivizes people to go spend money. And then as more people spend money, corporate revenues go up. As corporate revenues go up, they can spend more money, they can hire more people, and it's good for the economy. The challenge is we have inflation that's growing. We don't want inflation they're trying to lower inflation, not grow inflation. And if they lower interest rates, then that's not going to be good for inflation. They're trying to cool off the economy still. They want inflation to come down, but if they lower interest rates, then in fact, that's not a cooling down signal. But the market the stock market likes it because people will spend more money. Corporate revenues go up, corporate profits go up, stock prices go up. So it's all tied to interest rates, and which is just interesting to note. But I don't see how they can lower interest rates. But that's what they're predicted to do. I don't think they should. What else do we want to talk about? Talk about that. We talked about that. Let me take a peek and see if we have any questions. I kind of turned it off because it started bothering me and caused me to sidetrack. So we do have a few. So let me glance at these questions real quick. And I can't see really who these questions have come from. I'd like to learn more about tax and how we can optimize the saving. Okay, so that takes me to something that I think we probably should talk about. And that's the one big, beautiful bill, right? We've heard about this bill, the one big, beautiful bill. And I have to agree. Now, there's a lot in the bill that I haven't studied. Just like everything, there's potentially hundreds of different law changes. But what I wanted to do is really focus on what affects you, someone who's retired or someone who's about to retire. So there's a couple of things. First of all, the tax cuts that were made as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017 that Trump put into play, those are now permanent. Permanent until the next administration changes them, right? So we kind of understand that permanent doesn't mean permanent, but they're permanent through this administration. And if this administration ends in 2028, it's probably got a couple more years until something changes. So you probably have until 2030. That's actually great news generally across the board because taxes are lower from those tax cuts. That's one thing that's great news. There's also a senior bonus that went in there. That's phenomenal, actually. What it does is it allows you an extra $6,000 on your itemized deduction. So not only does it keep the higher deductions that they gave you, but if you're over 65 years old and you're married, you get up to $12,000 of additional deductions. That's $6,000 per person. That's huge. And that's good news. So that's something that you now have available as well, too. Because of that deduction, what a lot of media outlets are reporting is they're reporting that, and I've seen this in a lot of places, that 88% of seniors will pay no more federal tax on Social Security. And we've gotten questions about that. I've gotten people from my radio show call in and ask about that question. What changes happen with regards to the tax on Social Security? The answer is none. The tax on Social Security didn't change. But with the additional deduction, what it does is it brings 88% of seniors' incomes to a level that will either reduce the tax they pay on Social Security or eliminate it altogether. So good news, but the Social Security tax didn't change. It's just that additional deduction brings a lot of you under that level. So good news as far as that's concerned. What else? The SALT deduction, that's the state and local tax deduction, which was capped at $10,000. That went up to $40,000. That is extremely significant. That's the one tax that hurt Californians more than anyone else, was that SALT tax. it's now raised permanently from $10,000 to $40,000. That means that whereas you could only deduct certain things up to $10,000, you now can deduct those same things up to $40,000. So very, very significant savings. I'm actually excited about that. What else? The higher estate tax exemption, they increased the estate tax exemption to $15 million per person. So that really does affect just a limited number of people, but it is a tax-related question. And here's something else that's exciting. And you probably, this is probably not news to you if you're a teacher or government worker, but and this, by the way, is not related to the one big beautiful bill, but it's related to a law that went into place in January. And that is that teachers who were subject to the windfall elimination provision and government workers that were subject to the government offset provision, that's gone. And I think it should be. I always had a complaint about it. Why should you be penalized as a teacher or government worker if you legitimately paid into Social Security and you never, then you got a big pension because you started another career? Why should you be penalized? I always had that complaint. It's now gone. You didn't have to do anything to get it. You should have. That happened at the beginning of the year. You probably saw a big Social Security check come in because they retroactively paid you. I believe it was for all of 2024. Don't quote me on that. I believe that was the case. And that all happened automatically. You didn't have to do anything. So in March or April, you should have gotten that payment, which means if you didn't get that payment or you don't remember, then you might want to check in on it. But those are some things that happen, some tax laws. And since you had asked the question, learn more about taxes and how we can optimize the savings, I think that's that's some ideas that the new One Big Beautiful Bill actually helped you optimize the savings for you. So let me see. Let me take a look at our next question here. It's long, so it might take me a second to read it. So bear with me. Yeah, so are you familiar with Michael Keitz's reverse glide slope, where after 5 years into retirement, retirees should increase their exposure to equities and decrease exposure to bonds and cash? So I'm familiar with the concept. I'm not familiar with Michael Keitz's version, but the concept is that there are some individuals out there that are essentially saying that after 5 years into retirement, you should actually add more equities to your portfolio. So it depends on your situation. And what they really are referring to is they're really referring to the sequence of withdrawals or the sequence of returns is often what's talked about. I've talked about this a lot on my radio show. The idea behind the sequence of returns is that if you take a period of time, let's say you take a 20-year period of time, okay? And you look at that period of time and you look at the market returns over that time. And assume you're in a situation where you're withdrawing money from your portfolio. So if you have $1 million and you're withdrawing, say, 4% a year, $40,000 a year from your portfolio every year for 20 years. Well, if you look at the sequence one way, you're going to have one result. And if you look at the sequence another way, meaning that all you do is flip the order of events. So what happened in year 20 happens in year 1. What happened in year 19 happens in year 2. So you just flip it on its head and you change the sequence in which those returns happen. And you still have $1 million and you're still taking out $40,000 a year or whatever your withdrawals are. Then the bottom line is that you have a completely different result, And that's what they're talking about. When you do the numbers and you crunch the numbers, what happens in the first few years, okay, is going to have a significant impact on the rest of your retirement. What happens in the first 2, 3, or 4 years of your retirement, especially if it's negative, will impact the rest of your retirement. So the idea is that if in fact you wait for the first 5 years of your retirement and then you switch to equities, now all of a sudden you'll be okay. That's the Michael Keitz's view. And it's not a horrible view, but it's not my preferred view, because I think what you're doing, matter of fact, I know what you're doing, is you're just pushing the sequence of returns risk forward. I don't like you to be in a position where you have to guess with regards to what your portfolio is going to do or whether or not you can retire or stay retired. If you are focused on the 4% rule and you're doing what most advisors will teach you how to do, and that is you sell principal to get your income. The rule of 4% basically says you can sell 4% a year of principal and get your income every year, okay? Every year, and you should be okay. Well, the reality is when you look behind the scenes, if you sell 4% a year of your principal, that rule has been questioned, and there's really only a 90% chance that you'll be okay. But that's the rule that's been followed. And they can't even, they being the experts, can't even figure out what that right amount is. But the bottom line is you're having to sell shares to get your income. And when you have to sell principal to get your income, it becomes a guessing game. If you retire today and you're selling principal in a down market over the next 3 years because the sequence of returns, the market goes down over the next 3 years, like it did from 2000 to 2002, that's going to cripple the rest of your retirement because the sequence of returns was so horrible because of the simple fact that the market went down right at the beginning of your retirement. Well, if you wait 5 years and then you buy into equities, well, you just push forward that sequence of returns. If you buy equities after 5 years and now the market goes down for 3 years, you've essentially pushed yourself in a situation where you're just 5 years older when this whole situation happens. But anytime you have to cannibalize your principal, you have to sell shares to get your income, you are having to make some assumptions, you're having to guess. That is exactly why we focus for you to live off your interest and dividends, because sequence of returns doesn't matter at that point. If you have $1 million and you're getting $50,000 to $60,000 a year of income from your portfolio that you can spend every year, it doesn't matter what the value of your principal is. It doesn't matter what happens in the first 3 years of the stock market. That only matters if you're having to sell principal to get your income, not if you're living off of interest and dividends. So Michael Kaisis is just talking about what everybody else is talking about, and that is selling principal to get your income. And in your world, for those of you that are retired, we're not selling principal to get your income. Hopefully that makes sense. It's not a bad thought. There's still a lot of guesswork in that. And if you're selling principal and you're living off the eggs and leaving the chickens alone, it doesn't matter what the value of the chickens are at any point in time. That's why we talk about it. So let's see. What other questions do we have here? How to minimize tax liability for the Roth conversion. So, and I'm glad you bring that up. It kind of goes back into taxes, Roth conversion. So let me give you a quick update as to what a Roth conversion is for those of you that may not know. There's Roth IRAs and there are IRAs, right? An IRA is an individual retirement account, actually stands for individual retirement arrangement, but that's a trivia point. Individual retirement account is what we all refer to it. That's what it is. When you put money into an IRA, you save taxes on the money you put in, and that grows tax deferred, and you're going to have to pay tax on that money when you take it out, and you're going to be forced to take it out at either 73 years old or 75 years old, depending on how old you are. Because there's this thing called required minimum distribution. So you're deferring the amount of tax that the amount of tax you have to pay until a later date. You're kicking the can down the road. When you put money into a Roth IRA, you're going to pay tax on the money now, but that's going to grow tax-free forever. There's no required minimum distribution ever, so you get to control whether or not you ever take any money out of that while you're alive, and there's no taxes on that. All that growth is tax-free. So with an IRA, you pay tax now. With an IRA, you save tax now, pay tax later. With a Roth, you pay tax now, you save tax later. And a strategy that I think makes a lot of sense is to do conversions. And it gets very confusing because there's a lot of myths about conversion. So thank you for asking the question. When it comes to doing a conversion, one of the myths is that it's all or nothing. And that's not true. Oftentimes that doesn't make sense to do all or nothing. Oftentimes it makes sense to just convert 40 or 50 or 60% of your portfolio. So it's not all or nothing. Usually we don't recommend all or nothing. The whole idea is that if you have some money in pre-tax accounts and some money in Roth accounts, you can take income from your pre-tax account all the way up to your current tax bracket, But then if you need more income than that, you don't want to take from here because that's going to push you in the next tax bracket. Now you can start withdrawing from your Roth IRAs. And now if you're at the top of the 22% bracket or the top of the 24% bracket and you need more income than that, you can take it from here and you get to control your taxes. And that's the whole idea of having some in pre-tax and some in post-tax. And I can tell you from 26 years of experience that the clients that have the most flexibility are clients that have about half in pre-tax, half in post-tax. That's the clients that have the most flexibility. So it's not all or nothing. And most of the times it doesn't make sense to convert everything. Another thing that's a consideration, another thing that people think is that you have to do it all at once. That's not true either. So if you have $1 million in pre-tax and you want to convert it, maybe you've set up an idea that you want to convert half of it. So $500,000, but you don't have to do it all in 1 year. Matter of fact, it usually doesn't make sense to do that. You can do it over time. So you can, maybe you convert $50,000 a year for 10 years, or maybe you convert $100,000 a year for 5 years. The biggest reason that most people don't convert is because you have to pay the tax, right? But you don't have to pay it all at once, and you get to control if you're doing conversions when you pay the tax. If you just get in the raft and flow downstream with the river, you're going to wind up in the place that you don't like, and that's at age 73, and now you're forced to take money out, and you're forced to pay tax on it, and you're being reactive. One of the most common mistakes I've seen people make is that they're between 60 and 70 years old, and they think, oh, I can wait till I'm 73 to start planning. No. If you have 10 years until your required minimum distribution age, you have a golden window of opportunity to do some planning now. If you wait till RMD age, you're being reactive. If you actually start doing some planning now, you're being proactive. And I guess the question is, what would you rather do? Do what you have to do when you're forced to do it, or be proactive? You're going to have to pay the tax at some point. The question is, do you want to do it on their terms, or do you want to do it on your terms? If if you have 10 years or more, even 5 years or more, or heck, any year, it doesn't really matter. Even if you only have 2 years until your RMD age, that gives you 2 years to be able to do some Roth conversions and make it better than it would have been if you just waited. So yeah, Roth conversions are great. I think it absolutely makes sense to consider doing them. And hopefully that answers that question. So let's see. Looks like we got one more question. Is it good to take Social Security as early as you can? So the answer is it depends on your situation, but usually not. If you're going to back me into a corner and say, what's good, generally speaking, most of the time, the answer is going to be to wait until you're 70 years old. Why? Well, there's a couple of things about Social Security you need to know. First of all, Social Security is based on actuarial tables, based on mortality tables. So whether you take it at 62 or whether you take it at 70, it all breaks even around 80 years old. So you're not betting that you're going to live to 90 or 100. You're betting that you're going to live to 80, right? So if you take it at 62 or you take it at 70, it all breaks even at 80. Now, some of you, I know what you're thinking. You're like, yeah, but if I take it at 62 and then I reinvest it, then that's going to be, yeah, it doesn't work. It's not as good as you might think. It pushes the break-even age forward maybe 2 years, just depending on the rate of return that you use and everything else. So if you're trying to outsmart the system and you think that, I'll take it at 62 and I'll just reinvest that money until I'm 70, then instead of their break-even age being at 80, it's going to be about 82 years old. So if you're single and you don't think you're going to make it to 80, then maybe taking it as early as possible could be something that you want to consider. But and that would be a reason to do it. But what if you're married and you don't think you're going to make it to 80, but your spouse will? Well, there's such a thing called the widow's benefit, the survivor's benefit, that basically says your spouse, your surviving spouse, will be able to claim the larger of the two Social Securities that they're going to be receiving or that you're currently getting now. So if you wait to 70 and you get a much larger Social Security, and from 62 to 70, that benefit's going to double. And now all of a sudden you were smart enough to wait for 9 years. At 70 years old, you get that much larger benefit. Now all of a sudden, maybe you don't make it to 80, you pass away. But if that benefit is the largest benefit between the two spouses, now your spouse gets to claim your Social Security. They're going to lose theirs, but they get to step into your Social Security, which is now going to be the much larger amount because you waited. So I wouldn't say that waiting or that taking it early is, I certainly wouldn't say it's always the smartest move. That's not the case. I would say most of the times it's not the smartest move for the reasons that we just talked about. You'll get more if you wait till 70, and your spouse will get more if she in fact is not the breadwinner and she's going to get the larger amount. But let me go back for a second as well too, because I want to continue the discussion about 80 as the break even. When you run the numbers, if you were to live to say 90, then when you take Social Security at 70 versus 62, it's a massive difference in income at 90 than it is at 72. And you are well ahead of the game if you do live into your 90s by waiting until you turn till 70. We have software in our office that allows us to analyze your Social Security income. And it allows us to take all the income from all your historical, right off your Social Security report, put it in our software, and mathematically come up with the best way to take Social Security. And we've run it 10 ways to Sunday. We've been probably using the software for a decade, I'd say. And I can tell you that if you live into your early 90s, you're married, you live into your early 90s, if you were to have both started as early as possible, 62 years old, and you make it to our software uses 93. You both died at 93 years old. The amount of revenue, the amount of income that you would have lost by taking it early oftentimes exceeds a couple $100,000 just by taking it early. So most of the times it makes sense to wait. Another reason why it makes sense to wait is if you're working. There's a Social Security penalty that says you can only make $21,000 a year if you are under full retirement age. And if you make more than that amount, you're taking Social Security. For every $2 you make over that amount, what's going to wind up happening is they're going to take $1 back. So if you make $40,000 too much and you're under full retirement age and you're working and you make $40,000 too much and you're taking Social Security, I should say. Well, now all of a sudden you get to filing tax time. They're going to want you to pay half of that Social Security back as well, because you were over the limit. If you made $40,000 too much, you're going to owe $20,000 back of your Social Security. And you don't know this until you file your tax return. So it's another reason, if you're working, to probably wait. Now, once you turn your full retirement age, which for most of you is 67 years old, once you turn your full retirement age, then that goes away. But under your full retirement age, there is the fact is that taking Social Security early, a lot of drawbacks for that. So hopefully that makes sense. We did get another question. As soon as I get the last question, we'll go ahead and wrap up. How to pay for RMD withdrawals for additional taxes. How to pay for RMD withdrawals for additional taxes. So I'm not sure if I understand the question, but it does bring me to something else that we can backpedal for a minute here. But let's clarify. When you turn 73 or 75 years old, and that depends on when you turn 73. If you turn 73 in 2033 or later, your RMD age is really 75. But if you're going to turn 73 before 2033, your RMD age is going to be 73 years old. So when you get to your RMD age, the government is going to force you to start taking money out of your retirement accounts. And you have to claim it as income, and you have to pay tax on it. So I think that's important to understand. I'm not sure what else we're going to talk about with that question. So I think that's where I'll have to leave it there. So let me see, what else does this mean? As we started taking questions, let's go back. We talked about the Federal Reserve, the fact that they're going to lower interest rates. And I want to wrap up with some of the implications and what does this all mean to you now that I've answered your questions. Federal Reserve is going to lower interest rates. Now, what you need to know about that is that they control the short end of the curve. They don't control the long end of the curve. Now, what's happened when they lowered interest rates? Remember, they've already lowered interest rates by 1% over the last year and a half. But what's happened is it lowered the short term. It didn't affect the long term. The long term stayed high. They don't control the long term. But on the backs of the expectation that they're going to lower the short term, the long term recently, like over the last 5 days, has moved down dramatically. The 10-year Treasury has dropped from 4.3 to 4.08 today, almost 0.25%. Now, that's just a big move, but the long term is starting to come down. That means that any CDs that you have, when they renew, are going to pay a lot less. It also means that it's a good time to lock in higher interest rates for longer, because as the longer interest rates start to come down, interest rates that you can get today are not going to be available in 6 months from now. And a mistake that we often see people make, very common, is because CDs have been paying so well, a lot of people will take their money, put it in CDs. They'll take their 4 or 5%. I don't know that you're getting that today, but they would take their 4 or 5%, lock it up for 1 or 2 years. And the problem is now over the last couple of years, the Federal Reserve has already lowered interest rates. So when your CD matures, you can't get what you got anymore. You're going to take a reduction. And if you lock up money in a CD today, and 6 months from now, if the Federal Reserve lowers rates 3 times and that long-term yield, actually, it doesn't matter what the long-term yield does on short-term CDs. When your CD renews, you're not going to be able to renew it at the same thing, and you're going to be disappointed. We've already seen that because the Federal Reserve has already lowered interest rates. So you're going to feel good for 6 months or a year or 2 years, however long you lock it up. But after that, party's over, and you're going to be bummed out because you can't get that same rate. Well, at Providence Financial, part of what we focus on is the longer-term yield. And right now, you can still lock in longer term. You could lock in 5 or 6% after fees for a decade or more through what we do. But if we're having this conversation in 6 months from now, that may not be true. And it depends on what the Federal Reserve does. It depends on whether we have a recession. By the way, that we're not out of the woods. There's a 35% chance of a recession, and some people are saying that it's as high as 50. And there's one guy out there who's pretty well respected who thinks there's a 90% chance of recession. No one's necessarily believing him, but there still is 1 in 3 chance that we have a recession. We're not out of the woods with the way things are going. Stagflation would lead to a recession potentially. So the fact is that what was I? The fact is that interest rates are going to go down, and right now is going to be probably, mark my words, probably the best time in the next 5 years to lock in higher interest rates. And if you've been hanging around the fringes, maybe you've listened to my podcast, the radio show, you've been waiting for this market run to end, which we don't know when it's going to be. It's nothing goes up forever. But if you're there and you've been waiting to lock in higher rates, this is the time to do it, because rates are as high now as they will be in the next 5 years. I'm convinced of that. So if you've been thinking about investing for income, it's not a bad time to do it. In 6 months, you're probably not going to be able to get the rates you can get now. Another implication of interest rates going down with the Federal Reserve's moves over the next 3 meetings is the fact that your portfolio balances will probably go up a little bit. Now, when the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, when they lowered interest rates throughout 2024 and early 2025, your portfolio balances didn't move much. And we got some questions as to why. Well, that's because they only lowered the short term. And we said that the long-term rates stayed the same. The long-term, they didn't come down. And your portfolios, because we're investing for the long run, are more affected by the 10-year Treasury than the 2-year Treasury, right? Than short-term interest rates. But now that 10-year Treasury has started to come down a little bit. So I would start to see the balance of your portfolio start to go up. How much do I care about that? None. I don't care about that at all. But sometimes you ask. It doesn't matter what the value of the chickens are if you're living off the eggs, right? Doesn't matter. So if the value of the chickens goes up and you still get the same eggs, it's the eggs that you're living off of. For those of you that are reinvesting your income, you have these eggs and you don't need them and you're buying more chickens with them. Well, if the value of the chickens goes up a little bit, that actually hurts you. So, if you're living off income, you're living off eggs, it doesn't matter. So either way, I would expect that you'll probably, if interest rates keep going the way that they're going and the long-term rates come down, fixed income portfolios like you have react opposite of interest rates. So I would expect that your portfolio might see the balance go up a little bit. Don't care, but just an implication of something that probably will make sense to you. At least you feel a little better. What else? Annuities. This is a big one. I think we talked about this last time as well, too. Annuities are longer term investments. And if you have an annuity or you have an annuity or you need an annuity, let's talk about the annuities. Financial institutions make more money the higher interest rates are. That's true with annuities as well, too. I've been an annuity expert for 26 years. I started off in the annuity as more of an annuity salesperson than anything else. And then now we use annuities as a tool to help you get guaranteed lifetime income. But the higher the interest rates are, the better the annuities perform all the way around. You get more guaranteed lifetime income, and you'll get potentially more growth. And I can tell you with a 100%, with 1,000% certainty that annuities that have been, that are being issued today are better than the annuities that were issued 3 or more years ago. And many of your clients, we have upgraded tons of your annuities, if not all of you that have been capable. If you have an annuity that's older than 3 years, I don't care if we did it or not, you want to make sure that it's been upgraded or that we upgrade it, because new annuities today, even if you have to pay a penalty, are generally much greater, much better all the way around than annuities that were issued even 3 years ago. That's going to change in 6 months too, as the Federal Reserve starts to lower interest rates. Annuities aren't going to look as good in 6 months either. So we have a very narrow window of time. The Federal Reserve is meeting next Tuesday and Wednesday, and it's already built in. What they do next Tuesday and Wednesday has already been reflected in that 10-year Treasury. The Treasury market, stock market, they act proactively. They act ahead of time. So, but you probably only have 6 weeks until that starts to drop. So if you have an annuity, contact us and let us see if we can upgrade it for you. So those are the implications, really. We have another question, so let's jump back to our question. Are beneficiaries subject to required minimum distributions on inherited IRA or 401k assets? So the answer is yes. Beneficiaries are subject to distributions, and most beneficiaries are going to be subject to a 10-year withdrawal window. That's changed. That changed under Secure Acts 1 and Secure Acts 2, which happened between 2020 and 2022. A couple different changes in there, a couple different Secure Acts, 1.0, 2.0. Bottom line is that the required minimum distribution for beneficiaries that used to be spread out over their lifetime is now limited to 10 years. That can have massive consequences as well, too. Most of the beneficiaries, when you pass away, they're younger than you, they're in their prime, they're making a lot of money, and all of a sudden now they got to take your IRA at an accelerated rate of over 10 years, 10% a year. Oh my gosh. If I inherited an IRA like that, half of it would go right to the IRS, because we're in the 50% tax bracket when you factor in the feds and the state here in California. So that could be devastating. That also leads to a reason why you might want to do Roth conversions. If you're in a lower tax bracket than your beneficiaries are, for those of you that have successful beneficiaries, it may very well make sense to do the Roth conversions, not for you, but for them. Pay the taxes at your lower rate, knowing that when they inherit it, then in fact, they're not going to pay any tax at all, because they can inherit a Roth IRA. It's tax-free. They still have to take the Roth IRA by the end of the 10th year. But check this out. If you leave them a Roth IRA that's tax-free, they can leave it there for 10 years. Let it go for 10 years. Let it grow. Invest it however they want. And then by the end of the 9th year or by the end of the 10th year, take it out all tax-free. Oh my gosh. If that's what you're trying to do, then it does make sense to do a Roth conversion on the whole amount, not just half of it like we talked about earlier. So thank you for asking the question. When it comes to beneficiaries, absolutely, they have required minimum distributions that are subject to different rules. And don't forget, they have a required minimum distribution on a Roth IRA. You don't while you're alive, but they do. They do. Couple other things. Let me give you a couple of resources for those of you that might not be familiar. First of all, my radio show, which I do every weekend, is turned into a podcast. There's over 400 episodes. Everything is retirement related. And you could go to our podcast site, providencefinancialpodcast.com, providencefinancialpodcast.com, or if you just go to our main website, there's a podcast link. You can just link there. You can type in a word. You can type in RMDs, Roth, Medicare. I guarantee you episodes are going to come up where we talk about those different things. Most of them are, 35, 40 minutes. You can go and listen to them. So any question you have about retirement, feel free to go in and type in a word or just listen to the most recent ones. That's a resource for you. And yes, I make them available to the public, but everything that I do is for you, our valued clients. YouTube, I do a YouTube channel just for our clients. If you haven't signed up for our YouTube channel, you'll get an email when we put it out, but you might get it a day or two later. And if there's some really urgent information, that day or two could be a big difference. We've had that happen in the past. How do you sign up for our YouTube channel? You just need to go to our website, providencefinancialinc.com. And there's a YouTube button in the upper right corner with some of our other icons. You click on the YouTube and you hit subscribe, and I think you're done. That's it. And I will try to put out a video. Matter of fact, this segment here, the Q&A that we just did, we'll put that on YouTube so you can go back and watch it again if you want. And for people that weren't able to make it, my book. So More Life Than Money. It's become an Amazon #1 bestseller. And it talks about the 10 most common mistakes that retirees have made. If you're a client and you haven't read it, you should read it. If you're a guest and you want a free copy, I'm more than happy to give you a free copy if you want to, schedule a quick call with one of our advisors. You schedule a quick call, you talk with our advisor, we'll get you a free copy of that book. And if you're a client of ours, we'll send you a free copy anyway. You're a valued client. So, and how you would do that if you leave this meeting, then in fact, you leave this meeting, it will take you to our contact page on our website. And as soon as I end this webinar in just a few minutes, it'll take you to our contact page on the website. You'll just be able to put in your information and we'll have someone reach out to you and get you on the calendar. Just remind whoever the advisor is that you talk with that I said you'll get a free book. And if I said it, it'll happen. But if you don't tell them, it won't, because it's not something that's going to be on their radar. So we'll do that. Last thing for our clients is our client appreciation event. We sent out an invitation already. If you haven't RSVP'd, please do so. It's going to be November 7th at the Universal Sheraton up by Universal Studios. So I don't know, what city is that? Hollywood or North Hollywood? I don't know, but up by Universal Studios there. And it's going to be on November 7th. It's going to be, we'll send out a couple more reminders, but it's going to be at like 4:30. It's going to be a casino themed event. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have poker tables. We're going to have blackjack tables. We're going to have roulette tables. We're going to have bingo. So if you don't want to gamble, you want to sit and talk with your friends, you play bingo all night. That's going to be fun. So, and then like normal, I'll talk for 20 or 30 minutes. I'll introduce my staff. We've grown. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that you've never met. So we're going to share them with you. We're going to have a lot of fun. November 7th, save the date. It's going to be a little earlier than normal, I think. And we're going to open the doors at 4:30. Don't quote me on that, but I know it's earlier because we want, have a couple hours, all fake money, no real money, just going to have a lot of fun. And that's it. So hopefully this has been helpful. We've got an hour. And certainly if you have any questions for us, as soon as I click off and leave the meeting here, then you're going to be taken to our contact page. Fill out the contact page. Let us know what your question is. I truly appreciate you being here. If you're a client of our firm, thank you again so much for your trust, your loyalty. If you're not feeling confident in your retirement, I want to be the first to know, because we hear from our clients and our goal is to help you have the confidence and clarity that you deserve so you can have the stress-free and peaceful retirement that you deserve. And if you're a guest here and you want that clarity and you want that peaceful retirement and you don't have it because you have a lot of questions, fill out the contact form. We'll be in touch with you. We'll get you in touch with one of our advisors. We'll set up a quick phone call. We'll find out how we can help. Thank you. Have a great evening. God bless.